The quantum gates of the Galactic Defense Academy hummed with a familiar crystalline resonance as they prepared to receive the newest faculty member. Students from across the galaxy gathered in the grand atrium, their environmental suits and armor glinting under the light of 3 suns streaming through the transparent dome above. The Academy's reputation for excellence drew the finest warriors from every known species, each bringing their own advanced protective technologies and combat methodologies. Director Kexri adjusted his crystalline exoskeleton sensitivity, ensuring he would make a proper first impression on the new combat instructor. The towering administrator had reviewed Lieutenant Sarah Chen's credentials multiple times, and while her combat record was impeccable, he still harbored private concerns about having the human on staff. The quantum gates pulsed with azure energy, and the assembled crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Most expected an imposing figure in the latest battle armor, perhaps one of the renowned Meridian War Masters or a Draconid elite. Instead, a slender human female stepped through, wearing nothing more than the standard black and silver faculty jumpsuit. Confused murmurs rippled through the gathering. Several students adjusted their sensory arrays, convinced their equipment must be malfunctioning. Standing at merely 1.6 meters tall, Lieutenant Chen appeared almost fragile compared to the armored beings around her. Her exposed skin and lack of protective gear caused particular distress among the crystalline students, whose cultural obsession with armor bordered on religious devotion. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy, Lieutenant Chen." Director Kexri's voice resonated through his crystal-enhanced vocal apparatus. "We trust your quantum transmission was comfortable." Chen smiled, a gesture that several species present found deeply unsettling, as it exposed her surprisingly blunt teeth. "Perfectly smooth, Director. Thank you for the warm welcome." She walked forward with a fluid grace that caught the attention of the more observant students. Despite the Academy's 1.5 g standard gravity setting, she moved as if completely unencumbered. A Meridian student, their liquid metal armor rippling with barely contained curiosity, raised a manipulator appendage. "Instructor, your protective systems appear to be offline. Shall I alert maintenance?" Chen's laugh echoed through the atrium, causing several environmental suits to automatically adjust their acoustic dampeners. "No need for concern. This is all the protection I require for standard activities." She stretched her arms above her head, an action that made nearby medical drones hover closer in anticipation of joint failure. Director Kexri cleared his throat, a sound like chimes in the wind. "Lieutenant Chen comes to us highly recommended from Earth's Special Operations Division. She will be introducing new combat methodologies that may seem unconventional to many of you." The gathered students processed this information with varying degrees of skepticism. A massive Draconid warrior in the front row activated their armor's analytical suite, scanning Chen's unprotected form. The readings made no sense. How could such a vulnerable-looking being survive even basic combat training? As if reading their thoughts, Chen stepped onto the training mat at the center of the atrium. Perhaps a small demonstration is in order. The floor beneath her feet immediately adjusted to 2G, a standard warm-up setting that would challenge even well-equipped warriors. To everyone's astonishment, Chen showed no sign of discomfort. Instead, she began a series of fluid movements that seemed to defy the increased gravitational pull. The medical drones whirred in confusion as their sensors detected increasing heart rate and muscle activity, but no signs of distress. Several engineering students began recording the display, their suits' analysis programs failing to predict her movement patterns. Director Kexri watched as his new instructor effortlessly captured the attention of every being in the atrium. Perhaps, he reflected, his concerns had been misplaced. After all, the Academy's mission was to prepare warriors for the unexpected. And what could be more unexpected than a combat instructor who treated the impossible as routine? The Academy's primary training chamber hummed with anticipation as students filed in for Lieutenant Chen's first official class. The vast hexagonal space, designed to accommodate beings from every known sentient species, featured adaptive gravity plating and atmospheric controls that could simulate countless combat environments. Environmental suits at minimal power, please, Chen announced, standing casually in the chamber center. Today, we'll focus on natural movement patterns. A wave of uncertainty rippled through the assembled students. Zextal, a Meridian third year whose liquid metal armor gleamed like quicksilver, raised a wavering appendage. Instructor, my suit's minimal setting still operates at 60% capacity. Anything lower risks cellular disruption. Chen nodded, her expression thoughtful. Keep whatever settings you need to maintain basic life support. The goal isn't to match my exact conditions, but to understand how your natural form moves beneath the armor. The students exchanged glances through various types of sensor arrays and visual interfaces. In the observation deck above, several other instructors watched with poorly concealed concern. Combat training without maximum protection went against centuries of established doctrine. First exercise, Chen continued, dropping into a perfect plank position. We'll start with basic weight distribution and core strength assessment. Her form was flawless as she began performing one-armed push-ups in the chamber's elevated gravity. A crystalline student's facets flickered with distress. Instructor, your skeletal structure. It should be showing signs of stress fractures under these conditions. Chen completed her set before responding, her breathing controlled and steady. Human bones are remarkably adaptive. Under consistent stress, they actually become stronger. She stood, brushing off her hands. Now, your turn. The next 15 minutes produced a symphony of whirring servos and humming power cells as 23 students attempted to replicate movements that their armor was never designed to perform. Medical monitors chimed constantly, detecting elevated stress levels across multiple species. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Vix, the Academy's chief xenobiologist, who had slipped into the observation deck. His sensor tendrils waved in excitement as he recorded Chen's vital signs. Her endurance isn't from technological enhancement, it's completely biological. Below, Chen moved among her students, making minor corrections to their forms. She paused beside Kithal, a towering draconid warrior whose silicon-based armor could withstand the heat of a small sun. You're fighting your own mass, she explained. Try feeling the gravity's pull instead of resisting it. Thal's crystalline eyes narrowed. With respect, instructor, my armor's anti-gravity functions are essential for. Deactivate them, Chen interrupted gently. Just for 10 seconds. Trust me. The chamber fell silent as Cathal, after a moment's hesitation, disabled his armor's gravity compensation. There was a collective gasp as the mighty warrior immediately dropped to one knee, his own weight overwhelming him for the first time in years. Perfect, Chen said, surprising everyone. Now you can feel what you're working with. Your natural strength is the foundation everything else builds upon. She helped Cathal adjust his stance, explaining leverage points and weight distribution that his armor had been automatically managing for him. By the end of the session, the training chamber floor bore scuff marks from armor-clad students learning to move in entirely new ways. Environmental suits powered back up to normal levels, and more than a few cooling systems worked overtime to handle the unusual stress. Remember, Chen called out as her students prepared to leave. Your armor should enhance your natural abilities, not replace them. Tomorrow, we'll explore how your species' evolved advantages can work alongside your technological ones. As the chamber emptied, Dr. Vix approached Chen with his sensor tendrils practically vibrating with excitement. Lieutenant, your teaching methods are highly unconventional, but the biometric data I'm recording is extraordinary. These students are accessing physical capabilities their suits usually handle automatically. Chen smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead, a gesture that made the xenobiologist's tendrils curl in fascination. Sometimes the best way to advance isn't to add more technology, but to rediscover what's already built in. In the doorway, Kthal paused, looking back at his new instructor. For the first time in his academic career, his armor felt less like protection and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The Academy's testing chamber loomed before Lieutenant Chen like a metallic cathedral. Ancient runes of past warriors decorated its towering walls, each marking a successful completion of the gauntlet. No instructor had ever attempted the challenge without proper armor. Until today. The gauntlet's difficulty scales to match the participants' protective equipment, Director Kexry explained, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's harsh lighting. Without armor, you'll face the lowest possible setting, but even that has proven. He paused, searching for a diplomatic term. Fatal. Chen suggested with a slight smile. For non-humans, perhaps. The preparation room buzzed with activity as students and faculty gathered to witness the traditional challenge. The automated armor dispensary hummed to life, presenting an array of cutting-edge protective suits. Each gleamed with potential, their power cores pulsing with barely contained energy. Thal stepped forward, his own silicon-based armor reflecting the room's blue lighting. Instructor, I've calibrated the Academy's finest light combat suit to your specifications. It's the least restrictive option available. Chen approached the offered armor, running her fingers along its smooth surface. Beautiful craftsmanship, she admitted, but no thank you. She began her warm-up stretches, wearing nothing but her standard faculty jumpsuit. The medical drones whirred anxiously, their sensors already calculating potential injury scenarios. Dr. Vix's tendrils coiled with scientific excitement as he prepared to record what might be the shortest gauntlet attempt in Academy history, or the most revolutionary. The gauntlet consists of 5 sequential challenges, the chamber's eye announced, its voice echoing through the observation deck where hundreds of students had gathered. Environmental hazards, gravitational anomalies, combat simulations, endurance trials, and final assessment. Safety protocols are engaged at maximum sensitivity. Chen rolled her shoulders, bouncing lightly on her toes. Several crystalline students covered their sensory facets, unable to watch what they assumed would be a tragic demonstration of human fragility. Begin when ready, the AI intoned. Chen stepped through the first barrier, immediately confronted by a swirling vortex of high-pressure atmosphere. Without armor, she could feel every shift in the air currents against her skin. Instead of fighting against them, she moved with the flow, her body naturally adapting to the changing pressures. Impossible, muttered a senior combat instructor, checking the readings. Her lung capacity is adjusting in real time. The observation deck erupted in shocked whispers as Chen navigated the first chamber with an almost dance-like grace. Her movements were precise, efficient, and completely unlike the usual armored approaches to the challenge. Second chamber engaging, the AI announced. Gravitational variations imminent. The floor beneath Chen began shifting between different gravity levels, a test designed to challenge even the most advanced stabilization systems. Students leaned forward, expecting disaster. Instead, they witnessed a display of natural human adaptation that defied their understanding of physics. Look at her inner ear function, Dr. Vix exclaimed, his sensors working overtime. The human vestibular system is compensating for gravitational changes faster than our best synthetic stabilizers. Chen completed the second chamber in record time, pausing only briefly to wipe sweat from her brow, a gesture that caused several environmental suits to run diagnostic checks, mistaking the natural cooling process for a system malfunction. As she approached the third chamber's entrance, Director Kexry found himself reevaluating every assumption he'd made about human capabilities. The combat simulations ahead were designed for armored warriors, but somehow he suspected this unprotected human would reveal even more surprises. Combat simulation initiating, the AI announced. Warning: participant protection level classified as minimal. Adjusting parameters. Chen's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Don't adjust anything, she called out. Run it at standard levels. The chamber doors slid open with an ominous hiss. As Chen stepped forward, Thal noticed something that his advanced sensors had missed earlier. She was smiling. Not the diplomatic smile of a new instructor, but the confident grin of a predator about to demonstrate exactly why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. The combat simulation chamber erupted in a dazzling display of plasma barriers, their superheated surfaces casting an otherworldly glow across Lieutenant Chen's unprotected form. The observation deck fell silent as students and faculty watched, transfixed by what should have been impossible. Temperature approaching 200 degrees Celsius, the AI announced clinically. Recommended safe exposure time in standard armor, 30 seconds. Chen moved through the plasma field like water flowing through cracks, her body finding gaps in the barrier pattern that the Academy's most advanced targeting systems had never recognized. Sweat beaded on her skin, instantly vaporizing in the intense heat, creating a natural cooling system that made several engineering students frantically take notes. The Human Thermal Regulation System, Dr. Vix narrated, his sensor tendrils trembling with excitement, is actively adapting to maintain homeostasis. Look at how the evaporative cooling effect creates micro-pockets of survivable temperature around her. A series of combat drones activated, their weapons charged to non-lethal training levels. They moved to surround Chen, their tactical processors calculating optimal firing solutions based on standard armor weak points. Her complete lack of protection threw their targeting algorithms into disarray. Chen dropped and rolled as energy bolts crisscrossed the space where she had stood. Her movements followed no recognized combat pattern, mixing elements of what appeared to be dozens of martial arts forms. The drone's predictive software struggled to anticipate her next position. Fascinating, muttered Cathal, his crystalline eyes tracking every motion. Without armor restrictions, she can achieve angles of attack our suits would never allow. The chamber's gravity suddenly inverted, a standard test designed to evaluate armor stabilization systems. The drones adjusted instantly, their anti-gravity units compensating seamlessly. Chen, however, had already pushed off the floor before the shift. She spun through the zero-gravity space, using the drone's own energy weapons as impromptu lighting to track her position. "Look at her spatial awareness," gasped a Meridian student, their liquid metal armor rippling in amazement. No neural interface, no heads-up display, just natural instinct. Chen landed gracefully as gravity reasserted itself, immediately flowing into a series of movements that kept her between the plasma barriers while avoiding drone fire. Her breathing remained controlled, each intake of air precisely measured despite the chamber's rapidly changing atmospheric pressure. Analyzing human combat efficiency, the AI reported, a note of what almost sounded like confusion in its artificial voice. Standard parameters do not apply. Recalibrating. Director Kexri watched as Chen systematically disabled drone after drone, using their own momentum and energy outputs against them. His crystalline form vibrated with growing understanding. The Academy had spent centuries developing ever more advanced armor systems, while humans had spent millions of years evolving into their own perfect combat form. The final drone fell, its tactical systems overwhelmed by combat algorithms it had never been programmed to counter. Chen stood in the center of the chamber, her jumpsuit showing signs of heat stress, but her body seemingly unfazed by the ordeal. "Fourth stage complete," the AI announced. Time: 3 minutes, 42 seconds. New record established for unarmored completion. The observation deck exploded in excited chatter. Students who had initially dismissed the human instructor as vulnerable now looked at her with new understanding. Some began removing peripheral armor pieces, testing their own natural ranges of motion. "She's rewriting centuries of combat doctrine," one of the senior instructors mused, "not by introducing new technology, but by reminding us of capabilities we've forgotten beneath our layers of protection." Chen took a moment to catch her breath, using her sleeve to wipe away sweat. The simple gesture, so alien to many of the environmental suit-dependent species present, served as a powerful reminder of humanity's adaptability. As the chamber reconfigured itself for the final stage, Dr. Vix's instruments recorded something unprecedented. Several students' environmental suits were registering requests from their users to decrease protective settings. The age of absolute reliance on armor was beginning to crack. The gauntlet's final chamber activated with an ominous hum as Lieutenant Chen stepped through the threshold. Warning indicators flashed across the observation deck screens, causing several students to activate their suits' enhanced protection protocols automatically. Warning: environmental control parameters exceeding normal safety limits, the AI announced. Chamber pressure increasing to 10 standard atmospheres. Director Kexry's crystalline form vibrated with concern. Lieutenant, the safety systems. Keep them off. Chen interrupted, rolling her shoulders as the pressure began to build. The chamber's atmospheric processors created visible distortions in the air, like heat waves rising from sun-baked ground. Dr. Vix's sensor tendrils waved frantically as his instruments recorded Chen's physiological responses. Remarkable. Her skeletal structure is actually compressing microscopically to distribute the pressure load. And look at the oxygen absorption rate in her bloodstream. The crushing pressure that would have strained even the most advanced armor seemed to merely inconvenience Chen. She moved with slightly more effort, but her movements remained fluid and controlled. Several crystalline students' facets flickered in disbelief. Their natural forms would have shattered under such conditions. Introducing thermal variables, the AI stated. The chamber's temperature began to fluctuate wildly, swinging between extremes that would tax any environmental suit's compensation systems. Her surface blood vessel network, Dr. Vix exclaimed. It's adapting dynamically, constricting and dilating to regulate temperature without any technological assistance. Chen's skin flushed as her body naturally responded to the heat, then paled as the cold set in. Sweat froze on her skin during cold snaps, only to evaporate seconds later when the heat returned. The rapid changes would have overwhelmed most species' neural systems, but she pressed forward. Cathal, watching intently, activated his armor's analysis suite. The human's muscle density appears to be increasing under the pressure. How is this possible without mechanical enhancement? Biological adaptation in real time, a Meridian student whispered, their liquid metal armor rippling with excitement. Their species evolved to handle extreme variables on their homeworld. The chamber's next challenge manifested as rapidly shifting gravity waves, creating pockets of intense gravitational force interspersed with near-zero gravity zones. Standard procedure called for armor-based gravitational compensators to maintain stability. Chen, however, treated the gravitational chaos like a dance partner. She used the high-gravity zones to build momentum, then let the zero-gravity pockets carry her through complex aerial maneuvers that no armor-assisted warrior had ever attempted. Look at her inner ear function, Dr. Vix marveled. The human vestibular system is processing spatial orientation changes faster than our most advanced gyroscopic systems. A malfunction in the environmental controls sent the chamber's oxygen levels plummeting. Warning klaxons blared as emergency protocols attempted to engage. Chen waved them off, her breathing pattern shifting automatically to compensate for the thin atmosphere. Oxygen saturation at 40% of standard, the AI reported. Recommended immediate evacuation for unprotected organisms. Yet Chen continued, her movements economical but purposeful. Her body had automatically entered a state of oxygen conservation that the watching xenobiologists would spend months studying. This isn't just about physical capability, Director Kexry realized aloud. It's about adaptability. Each challenge isn't being overcome, it's being incorporated into her performance. The final minutes of the test brought all environmental factors to their peaks simultaneously. Pressure, temperature, gravity, and atmospheric composition fluctuated in chaotic patterns designed to overwhelm any single protection system. Chen's response left the observers stunned. Rather than fighting against each change, she seemed to flow with them, letting her body's natural responses work in concert. What the Academy had spent centuries trying to replicate with technology, human evolution had solved through countless generations of adaptation. As the chamber began powering down, Dr. Vix's instruments recorded an unprecedented event. Several students were requesting access to historical data about their own species' biological capabilities. The age of absolute technological dependence had met its first serious challenge, in the form of a human who turned physical limitations into advantages. The Academy's Grand Lecture Hall buzzed with excitement as Dr. Vix prepared his emergency symposium. News of Lieutenant Chen's performance had spread through quantum communications across 3 star systems, drawing unexpected attention to the usually quiet educational institution. Fellow academics, the xenobiologists' sensor tendrils rippled with barely contained enthusiasm. Today we witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a display of physical prowess, but a fundamental challenge to our understanding of biological adaptation. The holographic displays activated, showing detailed scans of Chen's performance in the gauntlet. She sat quietly in the front row, still in her standard jumpsuit, while hundreds of environmental suits and armor systems hummed in the audience. Earth, classified as a death world by our standard metrics, presents environmental challenges that would require our most advanced technology to survive. Dr. Vix brought up a rotating planetary model. Gravity fluctuations due to lunar influence, atmospheric pressure variations, temperature extremes, and thousands of predatory species. Cthul raised a crystalline hand, but surely their technology. Developed long after their biological adaptations, Chen interjected softly. We had to survive before we could innovate. The lecture hall fell silent as Dr. Vix displayed a cross-section of human muscle tissue. Notice the density and arrangement of fibers. What our best combat suits attempt to replicate through synthetic muscle strands, human evolution achieved through natural selection. A Meridian student's liquid metal surface rippled with revelation. The pressure adaptation in the chamber, that wasn't training. Partially training, Chen explained, but built on inherent capabilities. Every human carries the potential for extreme adaptation. We just rarely need to use it in our modern society. The holographic display shifted to show Chen's skeletal structure during the high-gravity segments. Several engineering students leaned forward, their armors recording systems working overtime. The human skeletal system, Dr. Vix continued, demonstrates dynamic microcompression properties we've spent centuries trying to artificially reproduce. Under stress, the bone matrix actually becomes denser and stronger. Director Kexry's crystalline form refracted light thoughtfully. Our armor development has focused on protecting against environmental challenges. But humans evolved to embrace them, Chen finished. Earth's varying conditions didn't just make us sturdy. They made us adaptable. The display showed thermal imaging from the chamber's temperature trials. Students watched in fascination as Chen's circulatory system automatically adjusted to each extreme, efficiently managing her core temperature without any technological assistance. What we're seeing, Dr. Vix explained, is not just resistance to harsh conditions, but active integration with them. The human body doesn't fight environmental changes. It incorporates them into its functional parameters. A young crystalline student's facets pulsed with curiosity. Is this why humans developed such complex martial arts? Because you could feel the movements directly. Chen smiled. Exactly. When you can feel every shift in balance, every change in momentum, you develop techniques that work with those forces rather than against them. The xenobiologist brought up comparison charts showing standard armor performance metrics alongside Chen's biological readings. Our technology attempts to create a constant, controlled environment. But human evolution developed something far more sophisticated. A system that treats change itself as a constant. The lecture hall erupted in discussion as students and faculty began to recognize implications beyond combat training. Engineers debated new approaches to armor design, while xenobiologists proposed studies of other species' latent adaptabilities. Perhaps, Director Kexry addressed the hall. We have been so focused on perfecting our technological shells that we forgot to explore the capabilities within them. Lieutenant Chen hasn't just demonstrated human adaptability. She's reminded us to look deeper into our own natural potential. As the symposium concluded, Chen noticed several students examining their armor with new eyes. The question rippling through the academy was no longer about how to build better protection, but how to better understand the remarkable capabilities that eons of evolution had already provided. The academy's training chamber had never seen a session quite like this before. Lieutenant Chen stood before her assembled class, but this time, something was different. Every student had voluntarily reduced their armor coverage to minimum safety requirements. Today, Chen announced, scanning the eager faces before her, "We're going to learn how your natural abilities can enhance your technological advantages, not the other way around." Kthal, his crystalline armor trimmed down to core components, stepped forward. "Instructor, we've been analyzing your gauntlet performance. The way you use the chamber's own energy against it. Could our species learn similar techniques?" Chen smiled. "Each of you has natural abilities that no armor could replicate. Let's discover them." She gestured to a series of training drones hovering at the chamber's perimeter. These units are programmed with standard combat algorithms. They expect armored opponents. The drones activated, their sensors scanning the unusually lightly armored students. Their tactical systems seemed almost confused by the lack of standard target points. First principle of natural movement, Chen demonstrated, flowing between two drone attack patterns, is understanding your species' center of gravity. The Meridians, for example, have incredible fluid dynamics that their armor usually restricts. A Meridian student, wearing only minimal containment fields, suddenly realized they could shift their liquid metal form in ways their full armor had always prevented. The drone's targeting system failed to predict the impossible angles of their counterattack. Crystalline species, Chen continued, nodding to a group of faceted students. "Your natural refraction abilities offer tactical advantages no sensor system can fully counter." She watched as they experimented with their body's natural light-bending properties, creating momentary visual distortions that confused the drone's optical targeting. Dr. Vix observed from the control room, his sensors recording every movement. "They're not just copying human techniques," he noted excitedly. "They're rediscovering their own species' natural capabilities." The chamber's difficulty level increased. Drones began coordinating their attacks, expecting the students to rely on their usual technological defenses. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented. A young Draconid warrior, silicon-based armor reduced to a minimal exoskeleton, discovered their species' natural heat resistance, made them nearly invisible to thermal targeting. A quantum phase student, freed from their usual containment suit, demonstrated their race's ability to partially shift between dimensional states, a capability their standard armor had always suppressed. "Your bodies," Chen called out, smoothly evading a drone's energy blast, "evolved these abilities over millions of years. Technology should enhance them, not replace them." The chamber's eye struggled to adapt its combat protocols. These weren't the armored warriors its programs were designed to challenge. Each student moved uniquely, expressing natural abilities that no standardized targeting system could predict. Thal, who had once depended entirely on his armor's strength, found his crystalline form possessed natural resonance frequencies that could disrupt enemy targeting systems. "It's like learning to fight all over again," he marveled. "But this time, working with my body instead of just commanding it." The final wave of drones deployed, representing the most advanced combat algorithms in the Academy's database. They faced not the usual phalanx of heavily armored warriors, but a fluid, adaptable force of students who had learned to combine their natural abilities with minimal technological enhancement. The result was beautiful chaos. Meridian students flowed like quicksilver between energy beams. Crystalline warriors refracted attacks back at their sources. Quantum phase beings shifted partially out of normal spacetime, while Draconids used their silicon-based biology to absorb and redirect energy attacks. "This," Chen declared as the last drone powered down, "is what true combat evolution looks like. Not just better armor, but better understanding of what you can do without it." Director Kexri, watching from above, realized the Academy's combat curriculum would need significant revision. They had spent centuries teaching students to rely on their armor. Perhaps it was time to help them discover what lay beneath it. The Academy's graduation ceremony broke with centuries of tradition. Instead of a parade of fully armored warriors, the graduating class chose to display their natural forms enhanced by minimal protective gear. The three suns cast multiple shadows through the transparent dome, creating a dancing light show as crystalline students deliberately refracted the rays. Lieutenant Chen stood at the review platform beside Director Kexery, watching her first class demonstrate their final exercises. The past months had transformed not just the students, but the entire institution's approach to combat training. Your unconventional methods, the director's crystalline form sparkled with amusement, have caused quite a stir in the Galactic Defense Council. They're requesting similar programs at other academies. In the demonstration arena below, Fall led a group of mixed-species students through a complex series of maneuvers. His crystalline form gleamed with only the most essential armor components, each piece carefully chosen to enhance rather than restrict his natural abilities. Focus on your inherent resonance, his voice carried across the chamber. Let your body's natural frequency guide your movements. The crystalline students under his guidance vibrated in harmony, creating interference patterns that would confound any standard targeting system. A Meridian graduate demonstrated advanced fluid combat techniques, their liquid metal form flowing through gaps in training drone defenses that no fully armored warrior could have attempted. Behind them, a quantum phase student phased partially between dimensions, their minimal containment field allowing a level of spatial manipulation that traditional armor would have prevented. The most remarkable change, Dr. Vix observed from his position near the platform, his sensor tendrils waving contentedly, isn't just in their combat effectiveness. Look at their confidence in their own bodies. He was right. Where once students had hidden behind layers of protective technology, they now moved with pride in their natural forms. Each species had discovered evolutionary advantages that centuries of technological dependence had caused them to forget. Combat efficiency increased by 43%. The Academy's AI reported. Energy consumption decreased by 67%. Adaptation response time improved by 89% across all species. Chen smiled as a young Draconid graduate demonstrated how their silicon-based biology could naturally absorb and redirect energy attacks, their minimal exoskeleton amplifying rather than restricting the ability. They've learned to trust themselves first, and their technology second. The ceremony's highlight came when the graduating class performed a synchronized demonstration of interspecies combat techniques. Crystalline warriors created prismatic shields while Meridian students flowed through the gaps, their natural forms working in harmony with technologies designed to enhance rather than replace their abilities. We've started something here, Director Kexery mused. A revolution in how we think about strength and protection. In the observation galleries, representatives from other military institutions watched with intense interest. The success of Chen's methods could no longer be ignored. Already there was talk of establishing similar programs across the galaxy. The next class has twice as many applicants, the director continued, including, interestingly, several from species we once considered too physically vulnerable for combat roles. Chen watched as Cathal led the graduates in their final salute. His crystalline form caught the light of the three suns, creating a natural light show that no artificial display could match. We didn't just teach them new ways to fight, she reflected. We helped them rediscover what they always were. As the ceremony concluded, the graduates gathered in the grand atrium. Each student's minimal armor configuration was unique, perfectly adapted to their species' natural advantages. They stood not as identical warriors hidden behind standardized protection, but as proud representatives of their species' evolutionary heritage. The Academy's motto, displayed in holographic glory above the gathering, had been modified. Below the traditional "through protection comes strength," now shone a new line. "Through understanding comes true power." Director Kexery turned to Chen, his crystalline form resonating with satisfaction. "You've taught us all something vital, Lieutenant. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember what we've left behind. As the three suns set on the graduation ceremony, the Academy stood ready to begin a new chapter in its history. The age of absolute technological dependence had ended, replaced by something far more powerful: the perfect fusion of natural ability and technological enhancement, each supporting the other in harmony.